Hello and welcome to Audible River. I'm Alan Rice, and I am very happy to have with me Annie Blackstone, who teaches shamanic practices, hypnotherapy, and reiki. And in addition to these practices, Annie also offers ancestral healing, brain spotting, biofield tuning, and several other modalities in her work helping others. Hello, Annie. It's great to see you today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Annie, I want to talk to you about shamanism, the shamanic practices. And so, can you just start by what would you say, just briefly, what is shamanism?
I think shamanism is traditional understanding that we are all influenced and a part of the natural world.
A part of the natural world. And so, in your what kind of shamanic practices do you teach or do that encourages that experience of being part of the natural world?
Yeah. Well, one of the prime things that people do in kind of core shamanism, so we consider core shamanism to be things that are kind of common to all traditional peoples.
Okay.
So for Christianity, before the conquerors came in and made everything um, colonized,
Okay.
people believed and were connected to the natural world in a way that we were interdependent. We kind of live in a human supremacist society at this point where our needs are prime and more important than anything else, whereas we are actually just part of the natural world. So then the trees and rocks and everything around us and the air and the unseen forces we all know, and traditionally people knew very much that they were influenced by unseen forces, right?
Okay.
That we have spirit, that spirits influence us, those kind of things. So one of the prime things that we do in core shamanism is we journey, which is a light trance work in which you go into other states of consciousness, maybe the superconscious or maybe another world, that you begin to work with those spirits in order to get information, in order to understand things better, in order to retrieve parts of a person that have left, or in order to find more power for them, or in order to heal people.
Wow. So,
Um,
so journeying, you said, is a light trance, right? So how do you get to that state?
Generally, we use drums. So some of the first, and no matter who you are, if you go back far enough in your own ancestral lineage, you'll find the drum and the rattle, the most primitive instruments, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's shamanic drumming is just like this, boom, 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 and that is considered to be the driver. You listen to this music, and it helps you to go to these other places. So in hypnotherapy, which I also study and teach, you do that by someone talking you into a more relaxed state. You do that by helping someone access their superconscious. In shamanic tradition, it's traditionally done in a way that is ceremony, that you create the space, that you bring in the drums, that you begin to reach out to contact those unseen spirits that we work with. And so commonly people talk about power animals and other elemental spirits that we work with.
Okay, so I think what I'm getting, what you're talking about here is that maybe all of us have this connection, but to be aware of it or to get engaged with it, we need some sort of practice, maybe, or something that will train ourselves so that our mind gets tuned into this other reality. That's what, well, let's call it unseen for most of us. I mean, a different reality. But it's okay. So some people may say, "Well, are you dreaming, or you're imagining, or is this? Are you connecting with something real outside yourself, or is it a mixture?" What would you say?
Yeah, well, I think it's always important to use your imagination, right?
Okay.
Yeah, we start using our imagination always. I say, well, so we're going to go journey. And so you start thinking about journeying and you think about what might happen there. But what happens at some point, this other knowingness takes over, and you begin to know things and see things and be shown things that you can't know. or you wouldn't know about a person. And part of the way we kind of confirm that is we journey for someone else. Someone has a question or an issue in their life, and we go and to this trance state, and we go asking for answers to of the unseen world and the spirits that are there. They will give us information. We bring it back to the person who has asked us the question, and we tell them what we experienced, things that we could not know. I remember one time coming back and saying to someone, I saw your grandma in the garden in a, I don't remember, flowered apron. And came back and told this person, and she's like, how did, I forgot about that flowered apron. How did you know about it? And I'm like, I didn't. Actually, I was shown that. It's not something that I knew. If I knew it, I wouldn't have to journey for it, right? And this happens quite often. We'll journey, many of us will do it together. We'll come back with some thread of the same idea. So those are kind of confirmations that continually are exciting, and yay, look at that. You know, it's always exciting to get that confirmation, but it happens all the time. So I know that this information isn't me imagining it.
Wow. Okay. That is exciting. Like you said, it would be very exciting to have that. I mean, that you're able to visit other spirits or being another reality, and to bring back information that you get confirmed in that way. Because I was going to ask about that. So for the average person, if somebody, I mean, because this is what I'm thinking. It's like, so the idea of being a shaman, it was like, oh, well, you have to be chosen, or you have to spend, like, 80 years out in the wilderness, or this kind of thing. But it seems like now things are different in the idea of the accessibility of shamanic practices to anyone who is interested. What do you say about that?
I would say, kind of my work, I feel like it is about modern shamanism. It is about using the traditions of indigenous peoples and actually just the natural world that we have presently in a way that fits in our society at this time. Yes, you can certainly still go do the traditional route, and you can be chosen to go and work with a shaman. But most of us don't have that kind of time.
Hmm. Right.
And the world needs us to like be doing this work now. Um, Very much so. The world needs us to tune into it. You know, there's a lot going on, and we need the medicine we need comes from the earth, in my opinion. So to your question, yes, it is accessible to anyone who wants to pursue it. There are talents, there are strengths, of course, in one way or another. I've worked with indigenous folks that I always tell the story of being in Peru and working with some maestros down there, and they are very much about good and evil, that there's good and there's evil. And I think at this time in our, not to say those things are not
Hmm.
around,
Okay.
but where we are in this is kind of like there's so many different yeah, we're not in a dualistic society, or I hope we're not, or at least we're moving toward being in a non-dualistic society. So it's not just about good and evil. There's a lot in between there. Certainly not everybody has the personal power to do, really big things, or to go to that battling evil, or go to being just good. Mostly just somewhere in the middle, right? Like
Hmm.
most of us can access that kind of information and healing that is in the middle there. It is available to everybody who seeks it.
Interesting. But something that you said in that, and I'm going to paraphrase terribly because that's what I do, about the world needing us to learn this connection. So what that made me think is, this sounds like that there's a relationship, and you talked about a connection to nature. So is the world, is nature, is the unseen reaching more people, or trying to reach, or am I reaching to imagine that? I mean, there's this, I feel there's a surge of people who are interested in this kind of thing, but is this also a response to a call from the natural world? What do you think?
Might be.
It might be. Okay. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to like what I feel like people themselves are in need of
mhm.
this tending to.
Oh, right.
I feel like that we need it. The earth is going to be fine. You know, like one way or another, the earth will be fine. But we, as a part of this, have become disconnected. And
Yeah.
the medicine that we need, I really believe, comes from the earth. All the things that are happening in the world now, if we could turn people attention back to being with trees, being with the earth, and being a part of that, a lot of the medicine we need is there. Um, so I don't know that the earth is calling us. I think we are needing this. This is something that we have disconnected ourselves from in many cases. Many people have. The other piece of this, I think, that I often talk about is we all know that energy is real, that feelings are real, that there's more to what life is than what we can see with our eyes or what we are trained to see with our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
We are all kind of dreaming this dream together, and that it's time to wake up from that. So as you wake up from that, you begin to notice what's around you, like really see it.
Uh-huh.
And you begin to understand the communication that's coming to us all the time, right? So in
Yeah.
this world that we live in, we're always getting information. As children, we're taught not to pay attention to that, that it's not real, that all, you know, so we close and close and close ourselves down.
Right.
So that that we're not aware of all the good forces and all the goodness that is the earth that's there for us. So we feel disconnected, and becoming more connected to the earth brings us in more connection with everything.
So we as beings on this world, in this world, we are born naturally a part of everything. Is that what I'm hearing you say? And that everything has a spirit, so to speak, and that we are one of all of it. And that so I'm thinking about like a lot of the things that you hear about people having trouble with. There's people have a lot of insecurities these days. They feel they have many fears about things that aren't going to go well, or they're not going to have the life that they hope that they do, or they feel like the people are judging them. Or there's all these talk about the depression and anxiety in society, and this I imagine is could all be coming from a feeling of being disconnected, because if a person felt, here I'm not a psychologist, but I'm just saying that if you felt you were connected with something big, something that touched you at the center of your being, that maybe these other problems wouldn't be taking center stage. What do you think about that?
I agree.
Okay, all right, that's right. Well, thanks for listening. Anyways, so
I think
it's
it is the disconnection that really causes all of that, and the connection to things that are not real, right? Like what could be more real than our planet and mother that is here for us our whole lives long and is always there. It's the Mother Earth. She's there. You're not alone. You always are a part of all the things that are going on around you in nature. And if you start paying attention, it starts talking to you. Like there are signs all the time, but if you're not paying attention and you're not looking for what's happening, then you don't see it.
so there's a
You
commu-
you expect to see always.
you see what you expect to see, right? Always, and that's how we're made. We're just well, that's an interesting, wonderful, and terrifying power, to have.
And I want to just say, like, it's not about taking a walk in nature, which is a nice thing. It's about sitting with and being there, right? Most of us go, oh, I'm going to get outside and I'm going to. So we go actually with the mission of me walking through nature. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go walk on the hills, or I'm going to go walk, wherever it is you're walking. But it's not, it's like you're still being supreme there because you are walking through it. The real key is to sit with it, to be with what's there rather than move through it all the time like we do in our cars. We're not really somewhere when we're driving through our cars. We're in our cars.
Right.
Same thing when we decide to go out and be connect with nature. It takes a moment. You need to slow down and sit with it and see what's around you and see what's going on. Like tune in like you would if you were tuning in with a good friend. Like what's going on here?
Like a good friend.
And
Yes.
pay attention, right?
Wow. Yeah. Now you mentioned in the journeying about going different places. or connecting with what? How did you put it? Something about a higher world. I think that you mentioned. Tell me a little bit about when you do shamanic journeying. There are like like a typical descriptions of the kinds of places that are available to visit. Like,
Mhm.
yes.
So again, this is core shamanism, which is taught in the Western world and other places too. But this is kind of a culmination of studies of people like Michael Harner and Alberto Villoldo, and different people who went out and studied among many different indigenous people. So core shamanism, kind of the middle of the road. So there are definitely different indigenous folks, and people and traditions that do this in different ways. But the way we do it in this kind of core shamanism way of teaching in the Western world is that there's a lower world, a middle world, and an upper world. And the lower world is the place of our power animals. So our power animals are generally energetic beings with their own lives and stuff. They're not just there for you. They have
Okay.
they are
Okay.
beings, right? It's not just you. That support and guide us for either sometimes for our whole lives, sometimes for just a certain amount of time. But they are the ones with the real power, right? Like we're just us, and we journey to meet with them so that they can help us to know more, do more, and understand more.
Okay.
So they can show and communicate with us in a variety of ways. They help us to perform what we need to do in the spirit world because they have the power. The other place that we journey in is actually this world where we're at, right?
Mhm.
So some ways that people, when you experience like how time gets kind of wibbly wobbly sometimes, and you're like, it goes faster or slower,
Yeah.
or how you have a sense of something happening. It's kind of that like liminal space that you get to in this physical world that we live in.
Hmm.
And then the third one is the upper world, which is it's a place of our teachers, essentially.
Hmm.
So this is sometimes people you journey to the upper world, sometimes to learn things. There are actual sometimes classrooms there. It's funny because it's not heaven. That whole up heaven above and hell below is just made up probably on the backs of this knowledge,
I was just
because
thinking that.
what
Yeah.
yeah, that's what kind of, all people knew, that all goodness, life, regeneration, all the things come from the earth, right? So what happens is when people come in and they start saying, no, that's bad, and so then, oh, that below ground is hell. No, this is our mother. But anyway, upper world, it's not heaven, but it does actually sometimes tend to have that kind of pastel-y feel to it. Um, but it could be anything. But often you'll find they're like big teachers, like people that, that in history that you remember, or in religious figures, Mary and Jesus and folks like that, or angels, or your celestial parents, or there's higher souls that you are in connection with,
Hmm.
will show up and talk with you and help you when you need it, or teach you something, or any variety of things can happen there. Um, yeah, and celestial beings, and even folks from other dimensions show up there. So often we don't really, we in teaching, of course, in teaching, you set up a kind of an artificial system, and we'll go, okay, you're going to go to the lower world and you're going to look for this, or you're going to go to the upper world and you're going to look for this. And the process of this is just to meet with your power animals, use the drumming, and go where you're directed to go. And that's what I meant about using your imagination for a bit. I'm going to tell you how to do it, and you're going to go do it, right?
Right.
And then
Right.
you go do that, you imagine yourself doing the things, and then at some point it changes, and you're no longer imagining, you're in fact experiencing things that you couldn't even make up if you wanted to, like you just couldn't do it, like
Okay.
it's amazing. So sometimes I'll be like, so we're going up to the upper world and you're going to look for this teacher and ask these questions, right? Or something like that. But in reality, when you're journeying for someone, to help someone else, or to get information for somebody else, you don't, you're going to go where the information is. And it is your power animals and other spirits that will take you to those places
Oh, I
and
see. I
what you
see.
need do. It's not necessarily, we teach it in a certain way so you can get an idea of what those experiences are like.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, if somebody comes to me and they have lost their own personal power or a part of them, or they've had something traumatic happen to them and they need to help with processing it, or any of these kind of things, I'm going to go and ask the power animals, where do we need to go? Like, show me what I need to see in order to help this person, or to do in order to help this person. So it's really also teaching and releasing your control, allowing to happen what needs to happen in the moment, and then it's actually not up to you.
Mm-hmm.
You are just making yourself available for the work.
And becoming a vessel of what needs to happen, the healing that needs to happen. That's I'm trying to think of a way to say that. I mean, that it sounds like that there's a real balance that a person is learning in this shamanism of, like, you initiate something. That's your intention. You want something to happen, and you start it, but one has to, like, let go of expectations to allow what you're asking for to happen. So that seems like the where the real skill comes in for the individual is managing those impulses, and how to,
Right. Yeah.
train your mind to ask for things, but then to let go of what you expect to receive the answer. Does that sound accurate? Or
Yes, again, you are correct.
oh,
So
okay, great.
part of, for instance, the training that I do, there's the idea of, we're learning how to do these practices. We're
Mm-hmm.
learning how to journey. We're learning the steps and processes in the different practices.
Mm-hmm.
We go into that now. But the equally important is your own processing and your own ability to begin to see clearly. So part of that is taking off all the interjects and things that culture has put on you,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to, because we're all experiencing things through our own filter. So I don't know, like, we can become less filtered in our vision, but also just knowing that, right? So leaving space for that. I'm seeing things a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to the shamanic practices and the things that are actually like traditional that way, you're also in a process of clearing your own stuff, healing your own self, so that can be available to be that vessel, that you can hear things without overlaying your own understanding or your own feeling about something. Well, equally important to actually learning to journey and do all the things is to be able to process your own stuff as it comes up, and your own past.
Wow. Okay. So I guess are there shamanic practices specifically for self-healing, and you just mentioned dealing with your own past. Is there, I mean, there things that you teach along that order?
Yeah. Well, all of it, right? So it's always experiential. So
Okay.
if we're talking, for instance, one of the practices that we use in shamanic tradition, very well, first is soul retrieval. So soul retrieval, the idea of soul retrieval is that as things happen to you in your life, sometimes parts of you are, so if something really traumatic happens, a part of you in that moment leaves, or could leave. It's
Okay.
possible that it
Possible.
left, right? So part of a shamanic practice in this is to go and journey to find that soul piece,
Okay.
right? So as we're learning these practices, we're also doing them for ourselves.
So
So
go ahead.
if someone is who is learning shamanic practice, has also, we all have, it's not just the big booms, it's also the small things, that happen to us along the way that can be traumatic in our lives. I know a 13-year-old part of myself did not want to move, so she didn't.
Okay. I see. So she stayed, and so you
I
found
had
her
to go
later.
find her later, yeah,
Oh,
because she didn't want to do what was happening in her life. And all of this, it happens to all of us, where we just kind of lose parts of ourselves. So in the practice of learning this stuff, you're also doing it. You're going back and finding those parts of yourself and beginning to understand that. The other stuff, so there's the practice of, here's how you do it, and you're doing it with someone, and you're practicing together.
mm-hmm.
And in my training, it's really lovely because there are people at all different levels of understanding this, because you can start once every 4 months, people start. So there's beginners and more experienced people. So they work together and they help each other to learn, just like, real life, where it's not all constructed a certain way. It's like, yeah,
Right.
when we're ready to come in. So you have that practice, but there's also like looking at those things, like what are your limiting core beliefs? What were people, what were you told about yourself that's holding you back in this? What things happened to you in a way that shaped how you see things? And the problem is, most of the time we're not aware of how we're seeing things. So
Right.
it's that waking up moment. We work with like waking up from the dream and beginning to see really what's going on, what's like really happening, not with how you're interpreting what is happening.
Yeah, it's like the whole red pill, blue pill thing. I don't know. That's like from the Matrix, but yeah, I can relate to that in many ways. As I've gotten older, finding out about how I didn't even you don't even know that you have these beliefs until you're confronted with it at some point, right? Or somehow you find it, and then once you deal with that, it's like it feels like a big release, and like everything changes, and it's like suddenly a light goes on. It's my experience of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, when it comes to you saw soul retrieval, you said you call that soul retrieval, and that's a practice that you learn in the shamanic training. But it also sounds like if this soul gets lost or peace gets lost due to trauma, that would mean that probably nearly everyone has experiences that they've lost pieces somewhere. So tell me a little bit about what is that like? You've lost a piece and then you get it back. How is that affecting a person?
Yeah. Um, so I had a person I was working with, and she wanted to have a child,
Hmm.
and she was having difficulty with this. And part of it is putting those pieces together, like figure like tracking back. And so in the interview process, we found out that she had actually miscarried 7 or 8 years before.
Okay.
Um, and that had affected her. And then even farther back than that, 9 years ago, she'd actually had a daughter. That's great, right? So,
Hmm.
and but she then says, but I had preeclampsia. So I actually ended up an emergency situation, went to the hospital. So when I went to do the journey, this is what came up. And it's not what came up for everybody else. We were journeying as a group, like maybe 5 people. But what came up for me was I found that soul piece that had been in the ambulance with her.
Wow.
And the soul piece had left, right? Had been like, thought she was going to die, like literally thought she was going to die and left.
Wow.
And when I found the soul piece, and so part of the negotiation is because sometimes the soul pieces are reluctant to come back, because obviously sometimes they left because of some kind of trauma, some kind of betrayal, some kind of something that happened that kind of caused that shock of this part to leave. So when I part of the process is, what do you need to be able to come back? So
Oh.
for easily to see, like if a child part comes back, maybe you need to do things that the child liked to do, right? Maybe the child like, well, I just really want to go swimming more. And you're like, can you go swimming more? Yes. Okay. So that's like, you need to do those, just like any kind of inner child work, right? You need to begin to draw on what it is that heart love to do and needs to do in order to come back home to you. So in this case, this soul part that had left during a traumatic ambulance ride asked that the woman, the soul part, would go through and like look at old albums and show her what had happened after that after the ambulance ride, because she had no memory of it, the
Oh.
soul part. So she didn't know. The soul part was overjoyed to know that actually there was a daughter born from this 9 years ago when this part left. But there was a part of her that like thought she was going to die, didn't want to experience that, and left. So in the communication with my power animal and it was like, I will come back because I want to help with the situation and it's important to be whole, but I need to know what happened since then because I don't know. So that was, and there's this always this agreement, and it's very sacred agreement that you make with those soul parts about like, here's how I'm going to take care of you if you come back.
I see. It's kind of it's a sacred thing, like you said. It's something that it's very very deep and deeply personal. That's
Yeah.
amazing work. So I imagine that having a soul part back, I mean, just thinking about it, it would feel like rejoicing, or like there would be, I don't know. I'm just imagining it's a reunion of something that was a part of you coming back that has to be good, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it has to be good. And sometimes like it's people are funny. They have to agree to these things. And sometimes they don't know how to be joyful.
I see. Right.
So
Yeah.
to start out with like allowing that joy to come through. Or sometimes, people are people. They often they've lost something. And when they get it back, they have to like actually make an effort to incorporate that into who they are. It's very sacred and it is an agreement and it is the beginning of taking care of yourself.
Right. Okay, so when you were just saying that, I'm imagining someone who has a certain purview of reality, certain purview of the world, or certain purview, they've decided who they are and what they are, and that something like this is very challenging to those perceptions, and so they have to work on that to allow this to be real. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Uh-huh. It can be a lot of work there for somebody, but rewarding
That's
too, I suppose.
yeah. Well, that's why they come.
So people come to you with issues. So that how did okay, first of all, I want to talk about the training that you do. You mentioned that you have ongoing sections that you're doing constantly. So tell me a little bit about how you do the training. I'm interested in that.
Okay. So we work with the medicine wheel. So every 4 months, we start in a new direction. We start working with the attributes of that direction. For instance, this weekend, we start a new section, and this is when people can join, is every 4 months. So this May, um, on Sunday, we begin in the direction of East, which is the direction of the archetypes of the eagle and the condor. So we study the things and the attributes of these archetypical spirits and the element of air. And for instance, and also, well, I'm not going to get that complicated. Let's stick to that. So the idea of the eagle and the condor is that they are farthest away from the earth and they have perspective.
Okay.
They're able to see clearly. Like one thing that's often said is they're able to see clearly that sometimes obstacles are actually opportunities. So at this level, this is kind of of course, it's a wheel and it's always turning, but this level is that you have kind of transcended a lot of the troubles of this earth. And so this one is more about connection to spirit and about kind of that 100 miles, like you can see from a great distance what the real plan is here and what's going on for you. So it's taking us out of that. So we start there, and there's practices we learn with that. There's inner work that we do with that, waking up from the dream and seeing clearly in that. So then 4 months from now, we go to study the direction of south, which is the serpent, kind of first and second chakra stuff, very primal. The way that reptiles and the reptilian brain think, and we work in that like with the body and like the beginnings. And then 4 months after that, we'll go to the west, which is the place of jaguar. So in this one, we're doing a lot of shadow work. We're doing a lot of kind of energetic work, releasing energy and figuring out what kind of energy we're running. And then 4 months after that, so it's a 16-month program really, and we meet once a month for one full day, and then there's some requirements of homework in between meeting up with your classmates and practicing what's going on. But it's just one full day, the third Sunday of each month.
Okay.
Final, coming back up to the north and hummingbird and kind of finding the sweetness in life. So that's kind of how it is structured.
So yeah, so your teaching is structured in four main sections that cover the four directions.
Yes.
Right. And so now the four directions, are they as like these are aspects of reality, these are aspects of us, these are they, I mean, like if you understand that as a shaman, if you understand the four directions as a shaman, are these like the way of engaging dynamically in different ways with what's real? How would you talk about that? If you put all the four together, how do you integrate that?
Yeah, I think that what it is that every people understood the four directions as all that is, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
certain archetypes that are associated with the directions, but really it's turning and giving regard and praise and um, all the important things. You're asking them to join you, right? So when we open the sacred directions, we're turning to each direction and each thing, and we're asking that they be present for us. So all the cultures that come through in this way, they're always acknowledging all things and our place within the all things. So that's a prayer to begin with. Here's thank you. And again, so it's a system like any other. That's why I say I wasn't going to get complicated. But for instance, I also attribute these four directions to the chakra system. So chakra, like your basic instincts, your basic needs start in the root chakra. So and then the reproductive, and so that's the kind of lizard brain,
Oh,
snake,
okay.
right?
Okay.
So then if you go to like third and fourth chakra, that's more active, that's more like family oriented and heart oriented, and kind of there's a lot of like dealing with your fears because you're thinking about things more, right? So that's jaguar. So you can overlay that, the chakra system, on the medicine wheel. I also overlay like the hero's journey,
Okay.
right? So the east would be the beginning and the ending, right? And then the south is kind of the call to adventure, right? And then there's some shadow work that happens in the west because that's where you hit your fears and you have to transcend that. And then you get up to the north again where the sweetness is, that's hummingbird, right? So there you're like the mastery, and then you come again to the beginning and the ending in the east. So it is a framework, it's an ancient framework that all people, because the directions, because of the stars and how we're a part of everything, but it's just another framework for studying the human condition, really. But in particular, it is honoring that we are a part of all the things. We are not above the all things. Like, if that makes sense to you.
It does. It does. It does make sense. And so, the four directions. This sounds really central to the shamanic experience. It seems like that this is this when so the four, because you divided the training into the four directions and the way you just described it, it's like your perception of everything is kind of held together in this reverence of the four directions, like they all of what and so I also love what you said. The medicine wheel is always turning. That this is a dynamic, complex relationship of things that's going on all the time, and the four directions is a way of grasping what that is. Right? I mean that's what I'm reading from what you're telling
Yeah.
me. Wow.
Right.
So Annie, how did you come to shamanism yourself? Is that is that
By by living, really.
by living? Okay, right.
Yeah, I think I was raised in a very unique situation of being raised on a reservation, but in Northern California, on the Yurok at the mouth of the Klamath River. So I had a sense of like indigenous teachings. I wasn't raised in that culture, but I had a sense of it and a connection with that place and that. Um, so as I progressed through my life, I just naturally kind of tended toward that kind of way of understanding of us being a part of all things
Mhm.
rather than separate from them. Um, so yeah, I had many teachers and always kind of in the spiritual realm and always trying to figure out like where I fit in and where I could be of most service. So in 1992, 93, I became a hypnotherapist. And there's a lot of similarities between hypnotherapy and shamanic teachings. It's really working with those unseen worlds, you know. In hypnotherapy, it's very much about our inner and spiritual world and our superconscious. And in shamanic tradition, it's much more reaching out to the natural world and for the resources that are there for us. But the practices we do are very similar.
And
The
complementary, it sounds like.
healing that we do is very similar. So getting into that and continuing on my own study with Paula Gunn Allen and a few other like local indigenous folks that in the Bay Area. I just, you know, it was just a way that I lived. It wasn't a way that, and, you know, traveling around. But it wasn't something I would ever say that I would do. I wouldn't say in any way, in fact, the term shamanism or being a shaman is not something I would claim. It tends to be true that it is something that somebody else says about you. It's not something you say about yourself. Although in the age of Google, we do like to label things, but it's not something I would claim. I know how to do a few things. I do have my own personal medicine that I use and that helps me and others in the world. But that term is kind of like, it actually comes from Mongolia. It has nothing to do with indigenous people on this continent, but because of the way the world is now, we use this term. So yeah, eventually Holly Holmes Meredith, who is the HCH Institute owner, asked me to teach this course. And I was like, I don't know. Like, how could I ever go home and say this to anybody or to my family? I was like, no, I don't. So what I did was I decided I needed to find out from the spirit world if this was going to be okay. And it was the right choice for me. So I went to Peru and did a few weeks there using ceremony and plant medicine there to like really get in touch with those spirits that would help me and work with me. Mm-hmm. And I did. I got a lot of backup. And part of the reason why I can do the work that I do is because I know it's not just me, that I have a lot of really strong energies supporting me and guiding me all along the way. So it makes it really easy for me. So I came back and told Holly, yes, I would do this work as teaching this course at HCH, and have been doing it now for quite a few years.
My goodness. Well, Annie, I've really loved having this conversation with you and learning about shamanism. But as you say, I mean, this is just a name that we have for it, but it's an experience I think that I think would be great for everyone to know about it, at least to know that this kind of experience, this kind of knowing is available. And so, and then as for you, people can find you online, right? Is that okay? They can look you up at annieblackstone.com. I'm going to put that.
No, simple, right? If you can remember my name, you can find me. Or at HCH Institute, the training. There's a lot more information about the shamanic trading there at HCH Institute.
Okay. Well, Annie, it's been wonderful talking with you today. And I'm going to say that this is all for this episode of Audible River. And I love hearing from our listeners. So if you have any thoughts to share about our podcast, please email us at audibleriverpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.